Hello, I'm James Milan, and I am joined today in our studio by Alan Tosti, who has kindly come in to talk with us about his role and the role in general of the Finance Committee. Al is the long-time chairman of the Finance Committee, and this presentation will be part of the series that we are launching called Your Arlington Dollar, which seeks to shed light on all aspects of the Arlington budget process and how the dollars come in and go out. The Finance Committee, as some of you may know, is an integral part of that process, and Al is here today to talk to us about the role of the committee, the process in general, and give us an overview of the entirety of the proceedings, what happens to the dollars as they come in and out over the course of the cycle. So thanks very much for joining us today.
Okay, well, glad to be here.
Appreciate your coming in, and just wanted to ask you to begin with, can you briefly describe for us what the Arlington budget cycle, how it is structured?
No, but I can try. The budget cycle really starts in the fall, early fall, with the sort of executive branches starting to put together their own budgets. And that basically comes from the town manager and the other appointing authorities. The school committee is starting to meet subcommittee meetings to put the budget together. And the capital budget committee is meeting starting in mid-September. So all through the fall, preparations are going to preparing the budget. There's various committee meetings. The long-term planning committee is preparing the 5-year plan and meeting on that. There's a revenue task force that's looking at revenue forces. The capital budget committee is meeting. All this is happening in the fall.
Excuse the interruption, but the capital budget committee, what are the kinds of things that are under their scope of duties? What are they looking at?
Well, the capital budget committee has a sort of definitions of what's a capital item. It has to be a certain cost item. It has to have a certain length of useful life. So maybe a calculator is not considered a capital item, but obviously a car or a truck is a capital item. So it should be able to last at least 3 years and be of a certain cost. And those things are going under the capital budget committee, which has been in existence since I think 1986, and ably led by Charlie Foskett as chair. With a number of other town officials and citizens.
Okay, thanks very much for that. Sorry for the interruption.
Not a problem. So basically all that's preparing the budgets that have to go to Finance Committee. So all the operating budgets from all members, all departments of the town have to be to the town manager by January 1st or right after that.
And could you just give us a quick sense of what are the major departments in town that are going to have budgets of significance that are going to be worked out in this way?
Well, the school committee would be the biggest budget, the school department. That's probably about $54 million. So that's by far the biggest department.
Probably and that's 53 or 54 out of a total of?
120, 130 million.
Okay, so very close to 50% of the budget.
And then the second biggest budget after that is Public Works. Public Works and Water and Sewer, if I sort of combine all those, that'd be the second, largely because of the large assessments that we get for water and sewer from the state. After that, it's Public Safety, Fire and Police, and then you pretty much drop down to smaller departments. You have the general government departments, such as the Board of Selectmen, the Treasurer Collector, the Assessors, the Controller, those legal, IT. And then you have the library, human services for some other departments in there. And then we have a series of enterprise funds.
Okay, what are enterprise funds?
Enterprise funds are basically self-supporting entities. The biggest by far is the water and sewer. But you also have the rink, the hockey rink, or ice rink. You have recreation, you've got Council on Aging, Transportation, and you have the Arlington Youth Counseling Center. So they have revenues, and those are put in enterprise funds.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
So that's being worked out. You're saying each one of these departments has a budget that they then are submitting to the committee generally, or how does that work?
They're submitting them to the town manager. So the town manager is obviously working on his budgets all through the fall, so he has his. But then all the other departments submit their budget to the manager, like I said, by January 1st. The manager then puts them all together into one comprehensive budget, together with the revenues, and then submits them on January 15th to the Finance Committee and to the Board of Selectmen.
Okay. And what happens from there?
Well, the Finance Committee receives the budgets from the manager in about mid-January. They're distributed either electronically or hard copy. Most of us usually still get them in hard copy, but electronically they can go into laptops. So we have more of the committee now bringing their own laptops and working on it that way. Still a minority, but it will probably increase. Then starting on the first Monday of February, we start having our meetings. And we meet on Mondays and Wednesdays in community safety on the second floor in the O'Neill room. And we meet on Mondays and Wednesdays from 7:30 to 10. Pretty much all through February and March. We usually have one or two meetings in mid-April to finish things up. And then we get the Finance Committee report, which is basically all of the budgets of the town, plus financially related warrant articles, get them in the mail or at least electronically out to the town meeting members. And if we can't get them in the mail soon enough, they're on the seats of the town meeting when they come in for their meeting.
Okay. And can you tell us something about just the makeup of the Finance Committee? Sounds like a big time commitment for one thing. So
it is. I mean, it's on February and March, we're meeting every week, twice a week, plus all of the meetings with department heads. So it is a big time commitment.
And like other such committees, this is a volunteer situation?
So it's all volunteer, part-time people. We have 21 members from the 21 different precincts. So we have one member from each precinct. Sometimes nobody applies from a precinct, so we could put temporary fill-ins for 1 year. So we try to have the full committee working.
So when you say nobody applies from a precinct, is that how somebody would become a member of the Finance Committee?
Right.
You would apply, and how does that happen?
We start advertising in mid-October. We usually run an advertisement, small advertisement, for about 3, sometimes 4 weeks in the Arlington Advocate. They've been very generous that way in getting those in. They're also publicized in the town hall, I think on the website, and we also get them on various other websites, advertising what precincts are vacant. Mm-hmm. And then we usually get applications in say November, by early December. We line them up. And then we go to the Finance Committee Appointing Authority, which meets in mid-December. And the Finance Committee Appointing Authority consists of the town moderator, the chairman of the Board of Trust Fund Commissioners, that's a selectman appointee, and myself as chairman of the Finance Committee. And the 3 members review the applicants, make a decision, notify the members, they have to get sworn in, and then we're ready to go to Finance Committee meetings.
Is it true, in a sense, that my perception that what the Finance Committee is doing in a lot of ways is kind of auditing these budgets? The budgets get submitted, and then the Finance Committee is the arbiter of deciding, does this make sense or not?
We divide all the budgets up into subgroups, and then those subgroups meet with the department heads, sometimes might be over the telephone, and ask them questions and until they feel comfortable with it. Our job is not to substitute our judgment of what should happen necessarily within a particular department from the professionals that have to run the department. I think our job is to make sure they sound reasonable. So we use a reasonable test. And if they sound reasonable, then we go with them. And all those discussions and meetings take place at the Finance Committee meetings.
Okay. And I think people could understandably have the perception that, well, you better have a finance background if you're going to be on the finance committee. Is that in fact the case?
It'd be nice, but it's not required at all. The first thing that we have to make sure is that you're going to commit the time. I go through very in detail all the time commitments and say, I need you there 90% of the time. Nobody can be there, very few people can be there 100% of the time. They have commitments to their jobs, they have commitments to their families. And so I don't expect anybody to be there 100, but I need people to be there 80 or 90% of the time. And this last time, it worked very well this last season to get their people there. The second thing is I really prefer people not coming on with a solid agenda. My job on the finance committee is to preserve this service. Well, no, your job on the finance committee is to look at the entire town, the entire financial situation, the entire service spread, and do what's best for the entire town. So I push that. And then you can't serve on any other committee. And that's by bylaws, and I believe even the Town Manager Act. If you're on the finance committee, that's the only committee in town you serve on.
I'm sorry, but we were talking about the capital budget committee, right? And
Unless town meeting and creating a committee requires that an appointee from the finance committee serve on that committee.
Okay.
So
So Charlie Foskett, you were saying, is the head of the capital budget committee?
That's right.
And he's also the
Vice chair on the finance committee, and he is our appointee to the capital budget because that's required by the vote or the bylaws of the town. And there's one or two of others, those. But the purpose is so that everybody in the finance committee does not have split loyalties. So I had one person who served on another committee, and I made this clear, and they decided not to apply.
That makes sense.
So,
Is there, given the demands and the fact that a person really needs to be committed to this, do you find that there's much turnover on the committee, or is it a pretty stable year to year?
pretty stable year to year. We usually have one or two. Right now, for example, I've got 2 vacancies on the finance committee that are being occupied by sort of one-year fill-ins that actually live in other precincts. And the bylaws allow the appointing authority to do that. But they only serve for 1 year, and then I go out and re-advertise it again in October. So this gives me the ability, or gives us the ability, to have all the precincts occupied. But if nobody applies from that precinct and somebody applies who's qualified from another precinct, then we plug that hole.
Okay. So taking a step back again and looking at the entire process, you were describing how the budgets come in from all the departments to the town manager. Then they are passed on to you in January to begin your own work on that. By April, everything needs to be done because it's in preparation for town meeting. What is it that in the end, if you're doing your job successfully and well, what are you passing on to town meeting? Is that an approval, a recommendation? What is the nature of?
We're passing on our recommendations in a fully balanced budget. And we need to look both at the short term, in other words, the budget that is presented to town meeting is balanced and balanced in a reasonable way, but also is looking to the long term. We have the town has a long-term financial plan, usually 5 years, and that's worked on in the fall too. And that's sort of the heart and soul of the finances of the town. So that, and there's agreements between all the town officials on how much their budgets can increase. And it's one of the really great things about the town is that the town officials work very well together. Between the schools, the other appointing authorities, the manager, the selectmen, the school committee, the finance committee, we work well together, and we have to. We don't have a lot of surplus revenue. The town does not have a lot of new growth, new construction, because we're a very built-out town, and therefore we have to handle our finances very, very carefully.
particularly important to be efficient in
Yes.
a town in which we're already at capacity in a lot of ways
That's
in terms
right.
of generating
That's correct.
revenue. I was wondering, in terms of making those recommendations, how often does it turn out that the recommendations endorsed by the Finance Committee are refused or refuted by town meeting, or is there generally quite a close correlation between what you guys recommend and what what ends up being basically in the budget?
Yes, we've had the support of the town meeting members for many, many years. We try to treat all the town meeting members with a great deal of respect. We tell them as truthfully as we can what the revenues are, what the expenditures are. We lay it all out in the Finance Committee report. We have the long-term financial report. Everything is out there. And we answer all of their questions as best as we can, as does the town manager and all the departments. Town meeting has a lot of questions going through town meeting as we go through the town budgets, and I think we try to build up that respect of ourselves and the other departments. We answer their questions truthfully, and 90% plus of the time they support us, and we appreciate that.
Okay. And you were just mentioning how crucial the role of the long-range planning committee is in
Yes.
terms of and I assume that that's a lot about forecasts and projections and,
That's correct.
and stuff like that. And I'm wondering, because we're coming out of a year like or winter like we've just had, there are certain unexpected events
Yes.
that are going to crop up, be they snowfall or something else. How does that kind of thing get worked out?
Well, snowfall, the snow and ice budget is the only budget that can legally be overspent. We have been trying to increase our snow and ice budget every year as much as we can if we have some extra cash. And so over the last, say, 10 years, we've increased it from 350,000 round numbers up to close to 800,000. We also have increased the size of the town's reserve fund, which is under the jurisdiction of the Finance Committee, largely to help with the snow and ice budget. If the budget is going to be overspent, the Finance Committee needs to give its approval to overspend that budget. And then if we can't cover it with the snow and ice budget and the town's reserve fund, then that becomes a deficit we have to raise in the next fiscal year.
Okay. And over time, is the assumption basically that over a 5-year period or something like that, things will more or less kind of even out in terms of these aberrations from, year to year, but in the aggregate, you can somewhat predict?
Well, we look at the last 5 years, we look at the last 10 years, and we're trying to get the snow and ice budget up to like 75% of the average for the last 10 years. We'd like to get it even higher, but there's only so much money to go around. And we also have it built into the budget that we are going to have a certain amount of deficit that we have to roll into the next fiscal year. So we have a certain amount of that built in. And this year, of course, was even more extraordinary. It's very hard to predict how much snow and ice is going to be, and it seems to be getting worse on that.
Right. Worse by less predictable, or worse by being basically just more expensive?
More expensive and more snow. So for example, the series of snow that we had was so bad because not only did we have to plow the snow, but we had to pick it up and take it away. If you get snow...
And then drop it somewhere, right?
That's right. And that becomes very, very expensive. We're not like a rural town where you just plow the snow off into the woods someplace. Or if we had snowstorms which occurred one in December, one in January, one in February, one in March, then most of the snow can probably melt in between. But when you get it like we have in February, it just keeps building up, and everybody knows this. There was no place to put it. That gets very expensive to ship it out of town.
Mm-hmm. And are there going to be consequences for Arlington taxpayers, do you think, of the fact that this seems to be getting, as you said, worse each year, as in more expensive?
Well, we have to plan for it in the budget, and that's what we've been doing. We've been planning for it. So that's why we've been increasing the snow and ice budget on a regular basis. We're recommending another $75,000 go in to get to close to $900,000. We've built the reserve fund up to $1 million, and probably half of that's going to go into snow and ice. And then the manager has to work to, come up with any differences.
Okay.
So.
Well, it sounds like, again, given the fact that we can't control those elements at all, that between the town manager's office, the other town officials, finance committee, et cetera, we really have our house as much in order as it can be in terms of dealing with contingencies like that.
That's right. I think we've done a reasonably good job, and town meeting has backed us in this and trying to put reserves aside because of these things.
Okay. I have just one last question for you, and it actually backs up a little bit what we were talking about. I just want to make sure I understand. Are all the budgets for the different departments submitted to the entire finance committee, and all of you have to review all of those as part of your meetings, or do you have some way of streamlining that process? Because that seems...
Well, going into January, everybody on the finance committee knows what budgets they're responsible for evaluating.
I see. So different members are responsible for different departments.
That's correct.
Okay.
And many of the people have done these budgets for years, so they know them well. So the minute they get them in January, they can start working behind the scenes to review them, to look at differences, to set up meetings or calls with the department heads and go through them, and then come back and present them to the whole finance committee and have discussions and everything. And then if the finance committee as a whole has questions, sometimes we'll have to table the budget and they'll have to go back and get the information. Sometimes if the information requested really is fairly small, we might pass the budget and they'll come back to us with the information. So, but all the decisions and all the discussion that go into the passing of the budgets all takes place at the general finance committee meetings.
And is it that one person on the finance committee would be in charge of kind of working with the budget of a particular department, or is it a small team, or
it's a small team? Yeah, we always try to have several people do it. If we have new people go onto a committee, we try to put them on with some very experienced people on it, and the vice chair is responsible for a lot of the town departments. Charlie Foskett has been doing this for years, and he's excellent at training new people, so they really have a solid sense of what this budget is all about. And some of them get very complex. Sometimes the most complex one are the health insurance or insurance, or water and sewer. Enterprise funds can get very complex. And I have two people that work on the spreadsheets and putting all those together and making sure they work on that. So we work together as teams, and it works very well. It's a great committee to work with.
Well, I really want to thank you for coming in this morning to talk to us, because there's a lot of stuff that we covered today that I think has not been clear for folks, and is going to be much clearer for our viewing audience.
And if I could add to this, there is a lot of information available to the general public on the town website. If you go onto the town website, there's governance, and then you look down at finance and budgeting, and you click on that, and there's a whole series of the finance committee report, the annual report, the town manager's budget and finance report, and things. And over the last 4 or 5 years, we've been sending out this finance 4-page public annual financial report. We used to mail it with the tax bills, but that became too expensive. So this went out in the Arlington Advocate, for example, I think about 2 weeks ago. It's 4 pages. It has a lot of the information that we could fit on 4 pages. And I hope everybody got it and can take a look for it. And if you didn't get it, it's on the website. There is also a tremendous budget visual on the website. There's a lot of information. And if you want to do more, my number's in the phone book.
Great. And so in terms of transparency and access to information, et cetera, the website is a great place to begin one's search and to be able to access a lot of these documents.
The town has, I think, done a tremendous job of trying to make this as transparent as possible. The manager's office has done a great job with a lot of these documents in the website. It's available, and there's also a question. You could email in questions on the website that people will get back to you with additional information.
Well, that's great. That last comment was prefaced my own question, or predicted my own question, because I was wondering, it's clear enough how people can receive the information about what's going on. How they can provide feedback if they're interested, or how they can make their voices heard is another consideration. But you're saying one tool for that is that on the website itself,
Yep.
there's an opportunity to ask those questions, and they'll get directed to the appropriate people.
That's right. That's correct. And plus that, the school committee, the board of selectmen, all their names are in the phone book. So. And the finance committee, so there are ways to get your input. All the meetings are public meetings. There's lots of ways to see what's going on.
Okay, thank you very much.
Well, you're very welcome.
Appreciate your coming
Glad to
in.
be here.
For Al Tosti, I'm James Milan for Arlington Public News. Thanks for joining us.